Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing online dating surprise, dumper mindset, get your ex back fail. I provide audio and email coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details. www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing online dating surprise, dumper mindset, get your ex back fail. So if you have been through a breakup and you want to try to get your ex back, I believe that you need to see things from all perspectives. Yes, it's important that you get advice on how to increase the possibility of you one day getting your ex back, but you also need to see it from a perspective of get your ex back failures. You need to understand what happens when somebody tries to get their ex back, but they fail. And that is why today's podcast is so important. This is a get your ex back fail story, which will showcase mistakes that you need to avoid if you want to try to get your ex back. There is advice amongst this story which will really help both dumpers and dumpees when they want to reconcile. So please make sure you listen to the end, because there are twists and turns in this story which might lead you down a path that you wasn't necessarily expecting. Trying to get your ex back is not a straightforward journey. There are twists and turns. There are tests you need to pass, and there are experiences that you need to go through in the right way. You need to maintain a stable mindset, and you need to maintain a persona of being happy, carefree and fun. And as you will see from the story in today's podcast, if you make the wrong choices, if you lose your stability of mind, then you are likely to become an ex-back fail story. So let's get straight into the story, and it's important for me to add that I will be protecting the identity of those involved. So I'm going to be referring to the two people as John and as Jane. So John and Jane were in a relationship. It was a few years in length, so a long, healthy relationship for a number of years. Unfortunately, their relationship started to break down. Now, it's irrelevant really for the story as for why their relationship did break down, because you need to be thinking of it from your perspective, and your perspective is not likely to be precisely as John and Jane's story. The ultimate reason for a breakup taking place is when there is a loss of romantic emotional attraction. When two people are in a relationship, they have a high level of romantic emotional attraction that they feel for one another. For a number of possible reasons, this level of romantic emotional attraction can start to deplete. It can start to fall. And when it hits a certain low point, that is when a breakup occurs. So it's irrelevant in the story as for why John and Jane's relationship began to fail. Unfortunately for John, Jane lost a vast amount of romantic emotional attraction for him, and it got to the stage where when it hit a certain low point, she wanted to end the relationship. So if you were listening to this from a perspective as a dumpee, you need to see from your own perspective you were dumped because your ex, the dumper, lost romantic emotional attraction for you. And this is the position that John found himself in, with Jane becoming the dumper. Jane ended the relationship and John was devastated. Again, if you are a dumpee listening to this, I'm sure you can resonate with the feelings that John was experiencing. John was very confused. John was shocked. John was feeling like his world had ended. John was feeling like there was no positivity on the horizon, and all he wanted was to get Jane back. But he didn't know what to do. And unfortunately for John, he made a key mistake, which I'm sure many of you dumpees listening will again resonate with. John began to beg. So John started texting Jane constantly, begging, pleading, trying to reason with Jane, trying to say that our relationship was strong and it can be fixed. I'm sorry for the mistakes that I've made. I won't make them again. Now, what John didn't understand about romantic emotional attraction is that once it has been lost, the person no longer feels that affinity towards their former partner. They will see them as best as a platonic friend and as worst as somebody that they no longer know, maybe even an enemy. So when you are trying to convince somebody to be in a relationship with you that doesn't feel that way, it is impossible. It is like going out into the street and trying to convince a random stranger to get into a relationship with you. They just don't feel that vibe. It is like trying to ask a platonic friend to be in a romantic relationship with you. It is just impossible to do it at that moment because there is no romantic feeling. So if you're listening to this as a dumpee, you will know what John was going through. John was experiencing the despair, and as he begged and pleaded and tried to reason with his ex, unfortunately he got nowhere. Now, John wasn't blocked, and I know some of you listening would have been blocked. If you've been blocked, then unfortunately you are in an even more challenging position, but I have known of many instances of where dumpers have in the future decided to unblock their ex. So certainly, it is not the end of the story necessarily. However, if you have been blocked, you really need to focus on moving forward with your life because there is also no guarantee that you will ever be unblocked. But in this story, in this instance, John was never blocked. Instead, Jane just ignored him. Jane ignored the text, the begs, the pleads, the reasons. It didn't affect Jane's mindset. Jane just ignored him. Jane was thinking, I've ended the relationship, and that is that. Now, whether Jane would have blocked John eventually, the likelihood is quite possibly. Because most people will eventually resort to blocking someone who is constantly frustrating them. And again, as a dumpee listening, you need to understand that if you've been dumped, your ex is not thinking much of you right now. They're not feeling a romantic vibe, and they might not be feeling much positivity or told towards you. So if you start to frustrate them by persistently contacting them, not respecting their decision and not listening to what they have said, you are not going to be attracting them back. You are actually going to be pushing them further away. And this is what was happening between John and Jane, but it never got to a stage where Jane blocked him. But in my opinion, it probably would have done if John hadn't suddenly realised that he must stop texting. So John went through the grind. John went through the pain. John went through the struggle. The months ticked by and John couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But trust me, if you're listening to this, you will get through this tunnel. John didn't think he would, but eventually he saw the light at the end of the tunnel and he started to move towards it. And that is the same for any of you listening right now who are dumpees. You will get through this. You will get through your bleak tunnel of despair. John got through this tunnel of gloom and saw the future in front of him, and he realised that he needed to make new connections. He realised that his relationship was over. And if he improved himself, if he moved forward with positivity, he could connect on a deeper level with somebody even better than his ex. And therefore, he decided to join an online dating platform. In fact, he actually decided to join multiple online dating platforms. So as John started to use the many sites and apps, he started to enjoy himself. He started to enjoy the conversation with new people and really understood that he could and would find a new connection even better than his ex. But then guess what happened months into the future? He received contact from his ex. He received contact that he never ever thought he would. It was Jane. Jane had decided to send John a message, and the reason this had happened because once John implemented my version of a no contact rule, the romantic emotional attraction in Jane's mind began to grow for John. And when there was enough fuel, when an ignition took place in Jane's mind, that is when Jane felt she needed to reach out to John. Now, I've delved in deep into these topics in other podcasts. Please make sure you subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and check out all of the playlists that I've done to listen in depth to when I talk about fuel, ignitions, and growing romantic emotional attraction in your former partner. It's important for me to say that this is not always possible to get to the level necessary. There is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back, and nothing will work 100% of the time. But if you use my version of a no contact rule, you will slowly but surely be growing the level of romantic emotional attraction in your ex's mind, but it will have to hit the necessary high point and have an ignition for your ex to want to reach out to you. This doesn't always happen, unfortunately. But if you do everything right, you stand an excellent opportunity of it one day taking place. And in John's story, this is what happened. Jane reached the level of romantic emotional attraction necessary for her to want to reach out to her ex, John, and when this happened, that is exactly what she did. John received this contact and was delighted. He thought, you know what, this has actually happened. I never thought it would, but now I've received contact from my ex. And although I'm enjoying using online dating, I really want to get into conversation with Jane. I really want to see how this goes. I miss my ex. So John and Jane started discussing things. John and Jane started sharing conversation, and things seemed to be going well. But that was until double standards took place. Unbeknown to John, Jane had also joined an online dating platform. Jane had been using online dating unsuccessfully, and this was one of the reasons why she began to think of her ex. One of the ignitions that can be used for when somebody wants to get back with their ex is when they realise that their life isn't going the direction that they hoped it to. It's when they realise that their life isn't as wonderful as they had hoped. And in Jane's instance, she had gone through a few months of using online dating platforms and never connected with anybody like she did with John. This was the trigger for her to want to reconnect with her ex. She realised that she was no longer in a position where she felt her future was brighter without John. But the important thing to understand is that Jane was using an online dating platform, as was John. They'd not seen each other on this online dating platform until they'd got back together during communication, and this is where everything began to fall apart. The communication was going well, and they was discussing meeting physically to see if they could properly reconcile and get back together. Unfortunately, Jane decided to check her online dating platform one last time before she deactivated it. And guess who she saw when she joined? She saw John. Now, when she saw John on the online dating platform, she became furious. She lost her stable mindset, and she texted John, shouting about, arguing and frustrated, saying that John wasn't serious about trying to reconnect with Jane because he was using an online dating platform. Now, John was shocked with this. John was shocked firstly because he hadn't been online dating since he'd began talking once more with Jane. But not only that, he was also shocked that Jane was using online dating to see John's profile. Jane tried to explain this as saying she was only on there to delete her profile, and then at that last moment she had seen John's. John was feeling like this probably wasn't the case, and Jane was trying to meet new people whilst also meets him. Jane also didn't believe that John had never used the online dating platform after they had started to reconnect once more. This caused a huge problem. Both people lost their stability of mind. Both people lost their expression of being happy, carefree and fun, and instead of they was expressing all of the negative traits of jealousy, bitterness, frustration, negativity, possessiveness, everything that you don't want to be expressing to one another, both people began to express. And unfortunately, that is where the story ends. The story ends with both people no longer speaking with each other. Now, there is every chance that in the future they might be able to speak once more, but unfortunately at this time, this has blown up. The drama has gone through the roof, and John nor Jane want to speak with each other at the moment. This is a get your ex back fail, and it could easily have been prevented. And it could have been prevented by using one important element in your get your ex back journey, and that is you need to be somebody who is understanding. You need to look at things from the perspective of your ex. You need to understand that once you broke up, you were never together and you were two single people. And what you do in between that phase of being together and getting back together is nothing to do with you. You have to be respectful of people wanting to move forward with their life at that time. And you also need to be understanding to each other's explanations. John needed to understand that Jane was only online to delete her profile. He needs to trust her. He needs to give her the benefit of the doubt. And Jane needs to give John the benefit of the doubt. Jane needs to understand that John did nothing wrong. John had been dumped. John was moving forward with his life. John was online dating. And John has every right to speak with new people until John and Jane get back together. People need to realise that when you have split up, you are no longer together. You are single people, and until you are back together, you can speak to additional people as well. If you start to be possessive, jealous and needy, this is not going to help you reconcile. And this is the perspective of both John and Jane. They both had the right to use online dating, and they both needed to trust each other. If you don't trust each other, there is no point in trying to reconcile. And if you were going to fall at the first hurdle, then what that tells me is that if they got back together, they would not have trusted each other for long, and there would have been another disaster not long into the future. It wouldn't have worked. If you don't trust somebody, don't try and connect with them. If you don't trust somebody, don't be in a relationship with them. But if you want to try and reconnect, if you want to be in a relationship with somebody, you have to trust them. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You have to accept what they are saying. If this starts to build up over time and you really think, you know what, I just do not trust them, well then at that stage, you must end the relationship. But both John and Jane tripped up massively here. There was no need for this to become a get your ex back fail. They stood every possibility through their positive conversation of reconciling when they met, and instead they let drama get in the way that was unnecessary. Please, if you are listening to this podcast, the advice is not to avoid using online dating platforms, not at all. I strongly suggest that you do use online dating platforms. They are a great way to make new connections when you are single. What I'm trying to get across to you is when you are single and you get into a relationship, you can't judge people on their past. And that goes the same for exes. When you split up, you are no longer part of their life. They are no longer part of your life. You can do what you want. They can do what they want. You can't bring this back up and accuse them of things because it doesn't count. And if people give you an explanation, such as what happened in this story, you have to accept it because ultimately they are both very plausible. So why didn't they believe each other? That is the sad question that I have to ask. Please don't fall into the traps that these two have done. Move forward with positivity. Trust each other. Give each other the benefit of the doubt. And don't judge each other on the life you live and they live when you weren't together. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.
Yeah, if you miss your ex, we can help with that. Help you get him back, or we can help find you someone else. Yeah, Vincent Bo, the relationship coach, giving you some insight, bringing you a new approach. DateMe.tips, go and check the site, giving you advice, helping with your love life. Get your ex back, or move to the next. Ain't no sweat, you know Vincent Bo got you. Finding love ain't no problem. Yeah, DateMe.tips, check it out now.